Developing a product requires careful balance between engineering, sales, design, and customer service. The founding CTO of a company often needs to take on each of these responsibilities, because when the company only has a few people, there's nobody to delegate these different tasks to. Cullen Zandstra is the CTO at FloQast, a SaaS tool for accounting close management. It isn't important what that means. We do describe what the product does in this episode, but the actual software product that we are discussing is less important than the general discussions that we have. Cullen gives some fantastic and detailed explanations for how to develop a software product from end to end. In the past, Cullen worked at MySpace, and after we discussed his current company, FloQast, we discussed some of what he learned at MySpace and the product development at MySpace, and why that social network proved to be less durable than Facebook. We also had some great discussions as to why Google Plus was also less durable than Facebook, despite having all the resources of Google behind it. Also, I should mention that FloQast is hiring engineers in their Los Angeles office. FloQast is spelled FLOQAST, and Cullen asked that I mention that, and I think it was worth mentioning because Cullen seems like a great product guy, and FloQast seems like a company where the sky's the limit. I also want to thank my friend Patrick Mathieson for connecting Cullen and myself. Patrick is a good friend and a writer on Quora. If you want to read some great stuff about venture capital and other strange things, read Patrick Mathieson's material on Quora. So I hope you like this episode. Life is too short to have a job that you don't enjoy. If you don't like your job, go to hired.com/SEDaily. Hired makes finding a new job enjoyable, and Hired will connect you with a talent advocate that will walk you through the process of finding a better job. It's like a personal concierge for finding a job. Maybe you want more flexible hours or more money or remote work. Maybe you want to work at Facebook or Uber or Stripe or some of the other top companies that are desperately looking for engineers on Hired. You deserve a job that you enjoy because you're someone who spends their spare time listening to a software engineering podcast. Clearly, you're passionate about software, so it's definitely possible to find a job that you enjoy. Check out hired.com/SEDaily to get a special offer for Software Engineering Daily listeners. A $1,000 signing bonus from Hired when you find that great job that gives you respect and salary that you deserve as a great engineer. I love Hired because it puts more power in the hands of engineers. Go to hired.com/SEDaily to get advantage of that special offer. And thanks to Hired for being a continued long-time sponsor of Software Engineering Daily. Cullen Zandstra is the CTO and co-founder of FloQast. Cullen, welcome to Software Engineering Daily.
Thank you so much for having me.
Your company, FloQast, makes software for accountants to do close management. In this conversation, I would like us to focus on the process of developing a product idea and bringing that idea to reality from the engineer's point of view. There are a lot of other podcasts that focus on the design point of view or the end user's perspective or the business or the sales aspects of product development, and I do want to touch on those things, but the main focus of this conversation will be on the engineering and your role as CTO as you were developing FloQast, and perhaps the lessons that people can learn more broadly from this particular case study. So let's start from the top down. FloQast is close management software. What does that mean?
Yeah, so the close in accounting terms is basically the work that has to get done in a given month for an accounting department. So really what that close management software is really at its heart just workflow management software that is designed specifically for accounting departments. And what that means in practice is, we're pretty similar to a typical work management software like Jira or Basecamp or Asana, except that we're designed specifically for accountants in the way that InVision is designed specifically for designers. So, we'll kind of look at the very specific workflow of accounting departments and build something that's going to fit into like that sort of keyhole really, snugly, and kind of just try to accomplish the goals that the accountants are doing every month, but don't have a way to track, if that makes sense.
I love the Envision analogy, both because we had the Envision CTO on about a week ago, and also because Envision is this product where you look at the process of prototyping, and in some light it sounds like a narrow problem where why would anybody buy software to do this design prototyping thing? There's such a narrow market, but it's actually a giant market, and FloQast seems similar. It's this very specific problem, but the closer you look at it, the more surface area you realize this problem takes up.
And that was something that I kind of learned in this process is just, it's amazing that a SaaS application like ours could be sold into, the LA Lakers, who are our clients, and a gold mining company who are our clients, and we sell into senior living facilities, and just all across the board we have basically every vertical that you could think of kind of does accounting and subsequently needs accounting software, which is one of the things I find so sort of incredible about SaaS applications.
And close management is something that even applies to my business. I was looking at FloQast and I was thinking, well, I have maybe 10 or 20 advertisers per quarter, different advertisers, and there's this protracted process of first you get a contract going, and then you get an invoice going, and then you have to clear that invoice, and that invoice gets cleared at some point while the contract is going on, and you've got all these loose ends, and nobody wants to deal with all these loose ends by just interacting with their inbox. So, and I think that's what a lot of these narrow or seemingly narrow SaaS tools end up doing is there is so much work that you do through your inbox and through Microsoft Word or Microsoft Excel, and what these narrow SaaS applications tend to do is they strip out some functionality and they make it like 10x easier. So there are lots of accounting tools. Why wasn't this particular problem solved before?
I think that it sort of came on the cusp of the advent of the cloud and cloud accounting specifically. A big part of what we do is bring together disparate data sources. So, now that people are storing all of their financial documents in places like Box.com or Dropbox or Ignite or whatever it is, and they also have cloud ERPs, all of their finances are now in the cloud, and it created this incredible opportunity where a software like ours can kind of step in and bring together those different disparate data sources and put them kind of on one screen. So, a big part of our business is sort of connecting the dots for people and pulling data from various different places across the internet and, to use an accounting term, reconciling it, which is basically just a comparison of that data and kind of alerting people to, any mistakes or issues that they have sort of cross-system. And I think that just wasn't a thing when all of your data was housed in a specific spot, like in a shared drive. But now that we're doing everything in the cloud, I think that there's just a tremendous opportunity for solutions like ours that are really geared towards looking at different systems and sort of aggregating data from different systems. We're kind of entering this new phase where it's great that we're on the cloud and we've got all these different systems doing all these different things, but how do we make sure that the data on all those various different systems is adding up and is what it should be? And so, I think that this problem is not unique to accounting specifically, but, it just so happens that accountants do a lot of different cloud computing at this point, and we're kind of there to help you manage that process.
Did you understand from day one that this product was going to need heavy integration support from all the other tools that people use for accounting?
Not at all. Not at all. In fact, when we first started the product, it was more geared towards just like a very specialized kind of task list. And it kind of just goes to show that, it's almost cliche to say that like ideas are meaningless in startups, but like really we had no idea that this was even a problem, and it only came about once we started talking to people, and you kind of get your first initial clients that are like, yeah, we're kind of interested in what you're doing, but hey, like how about this other thing? Like this is a real problem for us. How do we, take what you have already and like augment it to include, this kind of other issue? Having those kind of early clients that are willing to work with you and willing to like, tell you their ideas, that's how all of this came about. We didn't really know that it was a problem at all until, we were out in the field and listening to people.
Let's talk about how you got to that point where you could have conversations with people, which required you to actually build a product. How did you decide on that feature set of the first iteration of the product that you showed to potential customers?
Yeah, so, originally, kind of even before that, I had, kind of quit my last job and was looking for a new startup, and therefore I was just getting pitched all the time by different people with ideas. I'm sure as a developer, if you're looking to get into the startup world, you kind of have your pick of the litter when it comes to idea people. And so while I was getting sort of pitched all these ideas, my now co-founder, Mike, pitched me this idea for accounting software, and he was an accountant previously. And he's like, I had this specific problem where it was really difficult to track my tasks or my specific workflow in this, in accounting department. And, at that point, we didn't really know if it was a real problem yet, but, it seemed like a decent enough space to try something out. So we kind of just took that initial idea that he had from actually being, an accountant and ran with it, built a very small MVP. I think the MVP took me about, a month or something to program with a very kind of crappy design that I put together in Photoshop, and I don't know Photoshop at all. Just that was enough to put in front of clients and say, like, hey, what do you think about this? And, I was surprised to learn just how receptive people are. If they do have a problem and the problem is big enough, like, they're happy to take a half an hour, 30 minutes, an hour, a week or every month out of their day to kind of tell you about the problem, and you can use that to get to the next level.
And talk more about that early feedback process with customers, because at a certain point you have to start taking their requirements and putting them into engineering things. You also have to figure out how to connect certain complaints that they may be having with engineering tasks to do. Can you explain that process in more detail and what you should expect to get out of your early customers and how you turn that into early product development?
That's probably one of the more difficult things, because especially when you're very first starting out, you'll hear all kinds of, different ideas, and you'll be pulled in different directions. And at that point, you're just so desperate to sell some software that basically any idea that gets put in front of you that, a client says, like, I'll pay for that, you're immediately hot and bothered, and you think, oh, well, this is it. Like, I got to build this. The important thing is to remember that, like, it's important to, like, get to market and get selling software as soon as possible, but at the same time, it's also just as important to really consider every move that you make, because your most limited resource is development time at that point. So, the trick that we kind of used, or at least, improvised, was just trying to get as much feedback as possible and, cross-reference that feedback with, even a handful of people that are interested in the product. And, you'll start to notice similarities the more you talk to people. And the more similarities that you can kind of identify, then you'll know you really got something right. Once you hear the same thing 2 or 3 or 4 times from independent parties of like, hey, that's a problem, or like, oh, that could really be useful, then you can start to narrow down and, as much as possible, iterate. Build the smallest possible version that you can and just get it into people's hands. And as long as you have like a willing and able group of people that will test it out and give you their feedback, you can really trial and error your way into a decent product.
Are you ready to build a stunning new website? With Wix.com, you can easily create a professional online presence for you and your clients. It's easy. Choose from hundreds of beautiful, designer-made templates. Use the drag-and-drop editor to customize anything and everything. Add your text, images, videos, and more. Wix makes it easy to get your stunning website looking exactly the way that you want. Plus, your site is mobile optimized, so you'll look amazing on any device. Whatever you need a website for, Wix has you covered. The possibilities are endless, so showcase your talents. Start that dev blog detailing your latest projects. Grow your business and network with Wix apps that are designed to work seamlessly with your site. Or simply explore and share new ideas. You decide. Over 100 million people choose Wix to create their website. What are you waiting for? Make yours happen today. It's easy and free. Just go to Wix.com, that's Wix.com, and create your stunning website today. That's certainly true. I also feel like there might be a perhaps overly harsh narrative around premature optimization. So what I mean by that is I think for a long time people were mostly focused on this trial and error and just looking kind of around the corner at the near-term optimizations that you can make. I feel like with increasingly higher level tools and more sophisticated tools, I'm thinking about platform as a service things. I'm thinking about open source libraries, third-party services like Twilio that save you a lot of time. I guess full disclosure, Twilio is a sponsor, but I always use them as an example.
They're also our client, so.
Oh, they're also a client. Okay. I mean,
yeah.
Well, but it's also a service that just saves you a lot of time. And so the reason I'm mentioning these things is that because I feel like you get a lot of time savings out of these big platform like building blocks that you can fit together, I feel like you can make, even early on, you can make more ambitious roadmap decisions rather than just making short-term decisions. I also feel like that can sometimes be valuable because if you focus on the local maxima, you can end up with technical debt that is associated with that local maxima rather than making longer-term bets and asymptoting towards an architecture that will serve you better as you're going to scale. Do you agree that this is a trade-off and that I'm touching on some relevant things, or do you think I'm blowing smoke here?
I mean, I definitely think that there's truth to what you're saying, that, due to advances both in technology and in services, that it's much more possible to do a lot with a little than it was even 2 years, 5 years, 10 years ago. But I think that your margin of error when you're just starting out is just really low, and if you kind of whiff on a product, it might be that the sort of demoralizing factor kind of gets to you more than anything else, that you're there, let's say you're at an accelerator, you're just starting out, and you've got a runway in your bank account or whatever, and you're kind of month over month you're kind of just watching that runway go down, and you've got all this sort of pressure and anxiety about are you going to be able to sell some software. And at least for us, it was super important to just prove that we could get something working and get something that people were willing to actually kind of put their money where their mouth was and subscribe. So I definitely there's a lot that you can do now with services like Twilio, and I think that it more speaks just to the kind of magnitude of what can be accomplished with a 1 or 2 person development team in sort of a startup environment. And I think that kind of more speaks to just the progress of technology rather than the fact that you could whiff more often or something like that.
The more modest statements that I might be able to make about long-term planning in terms of product development might be around testing or continuous delivery. You could put these things in place early on as long-term bets or cultural practices that you want to instill even early on, even when you're building a piece of software for like one customer or zero customers. How early did you start doing testing and continuous delivery, or do you do those things?
Yeah, we certainly do them now. When we were still in the sort of ideation phase, and it was most important, because you're always weighing what resources that you have most of. And so when, you have more development resources and you actually have paying clients, then, software that works is your number one priority. But when, you have a group of 5 or 10 people that are, not paying for the software and like are using it just because they have a problem and you're trying to solve that problem, then if it, has bugs or, if it doesn't work quite right, that's not as important. What's more important then is just that you're moving closer towards, understanding what the problem actually is rather than, having the perfect solution for the problem. So I think on the outset of a new tech venture, to kind of put a lot of time and energy towards writing really maintainable, solid software, you're a little bit putting the cart before the horse, always respecting just like, what resources you have. If you have the resources, great, do it. It's like, you'll really save a lot of time and effort later down the line with tech debt and whatnot. And we definitely experienced a good, portion of like after we got off and running, we had this, kind of MVC that I built, and, I was fortunate enough to be able to hire my first couple of development hires. Were gracious enough to like take this kind of monstrosity that I had written and kind of shape it into a usable piece of code. But, you're just always weighing that, okay, what resources do I have the littlest of or the most of, and how can I leverage what I have to, kind of take the next step?
We talked about integrations a little bit earlier. If you're writing accounting software, you have to integrate with Oracle, you have to integrate with Excel. How do you test those things? Is it difficult to test around the black box of an externality that has closed source code like Oracle or Excel?
Totally. It absolutely is, and it becomes like an ongoing project. And, we're still surprised. We're still surprised at, something coming out of, these ancient ERPs like Microsoft Great Plains. Like it was literally written like 30 years, 20 years, 30 years ago. I don't even know, but like these ancient pieces of software that like you just have no idea kind of how they work, and it's just you never stop sort of like iterating on that point. And every new client that we get, it's kind of a new journey into okay, like how does this work, and what is your financials going to look like coming out of this system, and that's just part of this very unique business of just trying to integrate with these kind of ancient giants. And again, it's just like kind of trial and error. Every time we sign a new client, it's a little bit of a mystery and a journey to figure out, how, not even just how the black box of Oracle works, but how they're using the black box of Oracle. There can be many, many different setups within, a single piece of software. So, it's been said before, but like the biggest thing is just having a great customer support team that, will get to know the client well enough that, they'll work with us as we kind of struggle with these kind of black boxes, as you mentioned.
This is something that may not be intuitive to engineers who are listening to this show. What is the communication process between the customer support team and the engineering team? Because this is important, because this is where a lot of the feature development or the bug fixes can come from, is closing that loop.
Yeah, and for us, it was really important early on to get our customer service people really used to Jira and the way Jira works, and being able to create tasks in Jira and understand what ITSM is, and how to properly document issues. And that's part of their training at FloQast. It's like, here's the development team. Here's how, they sort of process new issues or tasks or whatever it happens to be. And so those two teams work very much in tandem, I think, at most startup companies, or most SaaS companies specifically, because customer service is just absolutely so important, and it oftentimes involves the developer hopping in and either seeing if there's an issue or at least understanding what the client is experiencing or how we can improve, or oftentimes the next idea will come from a conversation that a client is has some misunderstanding about how the software works, and that ends up leading to a whole new product or something like that.
Do you have any interesting practices around ticketing and how ticketing facilitates communication between the different teams?
I don't know if it's necessarily interesting or novel, but we definitely had a lot of work go into understanding how to classify tickets, like, what gets priority, what doesn't get priority, what needs to be worked on, by a developer, what can be sort of handled by maybe even a sales person or a customer support person to kind of try to circumnavigate the situation if it's, maybe a shortcoming of the software that we just can't get to. It's an ongoing, sort of living process, but, suffice to say, having solid ticketing and documentation is paramount. I can't tell you how many times we've gone back to old tickets to figure out, how we solved something for, kind of like what you mentioned with Oracle or, one of these other black boxes. We solved something 6 months ago, and now it's come up again. And, having that sort of historical information has been absolutely crucial for us.
And we mentioned InVision earlier. In my conversation with the InVision CTO, we talked about how there can be between the design teams of a company and the engineering teams, you can have these silos that are somewhat similar to the development and operations silos that the whole DevOps thing is trying to rail against. How does the relationship between design and engineering work? Because I look at FloQast and it looks like a product where you have to get the design right because you have a very specific customer in mind, you have a very specific workflow in mind, so that the relationship between design and engineering seems like it has to be pretty tight-knit there.
Yeah, absolutely. And we actually have our designers, in with the development team in every respect. They're at our daily stand-ups. They're, working directly with the developers. They're at least somewhat technically inclined. And we want to have, kind of information passed from, one department to another as though, through a pane of glass, and have, sort of just a constant communication between those two parties. Just because, as you mentioned, the product design is so important to a product that is filling a very specific niche like ours or like InVision. And so having, I've worked at places before where I hardly even talk to product, or the product would just come as a PRD that's already been sort of mapped out and thought out and finished in every respect, and you just get it as a development spec and you just build it. You know what I mean? Certainly not so with the way I think startups like ours have to function. It's much more of a conversation and much more of a back and forth. And we've been blessed to have some developers that were former accountants and have kind of made the transition towards doing development now. And so having those people kind of looped in, and in the building, I think that there's probably at least over 10 or 15 accountants. And so we try to incorporate feedback from all of the different departments: design, engineering, sales, support, and setup. It kind of all goes into what the product ends up being.
When you say you have 10 or 15 accountants in-house, are these people doing things like product management, or how do you have enough of it's like a third of the workforce?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. And another sort of fortune about building accounting software is it seems that there are quite a lot of people that got into accounting and now realize that it's just not for them, and so now they're looking for something else. So a number of our salespeople are former accountants. As I mentioned, our CEO is a former accountant. And I think the majority of our setup and support people are accountants by design, because they kind of, in dealing with the accounting departments, they have to be able to speak the lingo and whatnot. We've definitely geared, our hiring towards favoring people with an accounting background. And we've just been fortunate in the fact that, I don't know, for whatever reason, people are looking to make a transition out of accounting and get into basically anything else. but still leverage their knowledge of accounting. Yeah, I think we have at least 10 CPAs in the building, and so we've just, in that way, just been blessed.
That's pretty interesting. I've talked to a number of companies where they explain that the customer success people or the onboarding people are really well-trained professionals, and it almost sounds like you have to pay a good customer success person perhaps on par or at least in the same neighborhood as somebody who is doing something like sales or maybe even engineering?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And it's worth every single penny.
And that's really counterintuitive for a lot of people listening, I'm sure, because they think, oh, customer service, that's nothing. But in fact, it's actually super important at a lot of these.
It's everything.
It's everything,
yeah. Everything. It is everything. If you don't have,
and you're not going to be able to pay. Sorry to interrupt you again, but you're not going to be able to pay an accountant, a trained accountant, like a call center salary.
No, absolutely not. And you wouldn't want to. I mean, your customer service people are part and parcel with the success of the business. I just don't see how you could. I don't know. Maybe other people do it. I don't know, but I don't see how you could have a successful client relations without someone that is super knowledgeable about kind of what you're going through and, can instruct you how to use the software. And then, on the back end is able to kind of mine information from the clients about, what we're doing right, what we're doing wrong, how we can improve. Knowledgeable customer success people, I think, is absolutely paramount.
It's also a good moat. I think good customer service is a really strong moat.
Totally strong moat. I mean, every time, we on the development side kind of screw something up or, cause some sort of issue or the site goes down or something like that, having a personalized relationship with these people, our customer setup people definitely have taken the brunt of some angry emails, but, just being able to, if you have somebody that you can reach out to and even write that angry email and get a response back apologizing and trying to, make amends however we can, I think that goes a really, really, really long way.
The two product expansion models I've seen for SaaS companies that are solving a very tight vertical, such as FloQast, seem to be that you can either expand into adjacent markets or you can ladder up and upsell your current customers into more products, add-ons, better support, things like that. I'm not sure which of these strategies you intend to move towards, but can you explain how that strategic forecasting affects your current product development, or does it even affect current product development?
Yeah, I mean, it absolutely does. We're definitely at the phase where, ACVs are becoming really, really, really important.
Sorry, what?
So we're
ACV?
Yeah, average contract value. Basically, the value of each deal that you're sort of signing. And so, basically that number really determines a lot about how you can raise money and, says a lot about what the market is that you're going after. So whatever you can do to raise that average contract value, will really do kind of wonders for your company. And so, as you mentioned, there's kind of two ways to do that, and it's either upsells with, new products that are, in the same department, or kind of trying to expand, let's say to different areas of finance, or, maybe even something totally different. For us, it's definitely something that we kind of grapple with and think about a lot. For us, at least at this point, we're kind of under the auspices that building upsells is probably the easiest way, or at least the most low-risk way to increase our ACVs. And that's mostly because you can use your current client base to shop ideas and shop new products with pretty low risk. You're once you have a sort of network effect, you can leverage that network in a really interesting ways to kind of get a great sense of what is going to sell and what isn't before you even build anything. So, we're at the point where there's a lot of low-hanging fruit for us that, we can just go to our current client base and ask hey, would you pay for this if we built it? I think it's more difficult to try to, land and expand into a different
food delivery.
Yeah, right. or even in like a different group of finance, right? Because then you have to like leverage your current connection and be like, hey, can you put me in touch with Bob and the CFO or whatever it is, as opposed to using the people that you've already developed a really solid relationship with to just sort of ask. I think that there are certain limits to that, though. You can't always upsell. There's that point where you can't just continually upsell into the current client base, and you'll have to expand to other people in the company or whatever it happens to be.
Good customer relationships define the success of your business. Zendesk helps you build better mobile apps and retain users. With Zendesk mobile SDKs, you can bring native in-app support to your app quickly and easily. If a user discovers a bug in your app, that user can view help content and start a conversation with your support team without leaving your app. The conversations go into Zendesk and can automatically include information about the user's app information, device information, usage history, and more. Best of all, this is included with Zendesk for no extra charge. Use the out-of-the-box iOS UI to get up and running quickly, or build your own UI and work with the SDK API providers. Keep your customers happy with Zendesk. Software Engineering Daily listeners can use promo code SEDaily for $177 off. Thanks to Zendesk for supporting Software Engineering Daily, and you can check out zendesk.com/SEDaily to support Software Engineering Daily and get $177 off your Zendesk. You can also imagine land and expand happening organically, where you have so many people using the product. Some of the people that are using the product are like, hey, I'm having to bend over backwards to do what I want with this product because it wasn't actually built for that purpose. But the reason that they're bending over backwards is because there's just nothing in the market for them. And so that kind of thing can signal, oh, well, I guess we should build like veterinary software or something.
Yeah, and we've definitely experienced that exact problem.
Really?
Absolutely. We've had people kind of, trying to shoehorn FloQast into, a fairly different use case. And I think that can be, really enticing, but also something that, like, you really, 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 really need to think about, diverging. We're still a fairly small development team. There's about 12 of us now. So, we're not at the point where, like, we can really focus on too many products at a time. So, trying to diverge into or answering requests to like kind of shoehorn the software into something different, it goes back to all along the way, you really have to think about what resources you have and how to best leverage them.
Yeah, and your incentive structure. I mean, in terms of resources, if you're a company like Google and you have a giant profit flywheel, then you can throw off, $2 million on a crazy accounting software experiment for veterinarians. And if you're a company like Uber, where your platform is based on subsidies and it only works if you build additional products on top of that platform, then you also have to take a lot of experiments. But if you're in the SaaS, the sort of like SaaS towards a vertical thing, I think your strategy of the vertical upsell as a potential growth strategy is a lot safer. It's a lot more sensible.
Totally.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, to your point, like, the other factor to weigh in all of that is, like, what is your market size? And if, you have a blue ocean and the market is wide open, then why bother trying to, extend yourself and, move into different departments or move into different products? That just means that you need to scale up more on the sales side rather than the product side.
So this is related to a topic I've been thinking about a lot lately, which is where you sometimes have to choose to be internally focused or to be competitor focused. And my perspective is that when you are in a greenfield market, it's okay to be totally internally focused, or maybe you want to call it customer focused. Like that's what Bezos always says. Oh, we're just focused on the customer. We're not competitor focused. But when you are in a market with entrenched players, and these entrenched players have entrenched workflows, you sometimes do want to be competitor focused. In certain areas of Amazon, you look at that light sail product that they released on AWS, and it's just like they're trying to obviate DigitalOcean. They're trying to like just clone DigitalOcean because it works. You do see Amazon do this sometimes when they take what looks like a competitor-focused approach because they see a competitor who is doing something right and they think they could do it better. What are your thoughts on that? Do you have to focus on competing products because you're in this very specific space, or do you feel like you're just customer-focused?
I don't think that you honestly can be competitor-focused at all. I just don't think that it works.
Under any circumstance?
Yeah, under any circumstance at all. I don't think that the model works because there's so much that goes into building a product. And to look on the outside, even if you understand the product well, to look on the outside at a product and then try to replicate that product, like there's just so much nuance that goes into every small decision. And without, having had developed that nuance or an understanding of why the nuance is there, like I just don't think that it works. Every time that we've looked at one of our competitors and thought, hey, like we should do that, we always came to the same conclusion of like, we don't really understand why they're doing that, and, in like the most minute detail, and, they're the ones that like have talked to the clients and really understand the problem, and they'll probably understand the problem better than we do. And so like I feel like it's very difficult to emulate a product well. And I can't point to any good implementations where I've seen someone kind of just like, rip off an idea and have it go super, super well. I just think that like when you're solving a problem like that, to look at a competitor, maybe it's a good idea to like just keep tabs on what your competitors are doing and, kind of understanding where the market is going, but without having kind of the firm, foundation of why it's a problem. Like, I don't see possibility to build a great product.
You've seen these Instagram stories thing, right? Where Instagram just copied the Snapchat feature?
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess for people who don't know, Snapchat had this super popular feature they still have this super popular feature called Stories, and Instagram, which is a Facebook product, copied the Stories, and they did it better than Snapchat. And this was a brand new feature, or this is a feature that hadn't really existed in social networks before, and Facebook just ripped it off, and they totally were open about it. They said, we're taking this feature because we think it's awesome. You look at that, and it's like the execution is incredible. I do wonder if they're making a deal with the devil when they're doing the feature copying, and it feels a little like embrace, extend, extinguish, or I don't know. I mean, obviously the execution is wonderful. I love having stories in Instagram. You might have seen the Snap S1 where you see the results of stories going into Instagram. It looks like it has cut down the Snap user base. Do you think that Facebook is making a deal with the devil here when it's sort of implicitly saying that it is okay to be competitor focused?
It's a great question, and I'm honestly kind of surprised that they would sort of so blatantly come out and say that, they're basically recycling that idea. I'm surprised because people use Instagram and Snapchat for very different things, so it seems strange to me that they'd, even if, now Instagram has stories, that people would use them for the same, uses or whatever, or, same content, or, it wasn't uncommon for people to have both a Snapchat and an Instagram, and I don't imagine that, people are going to start using, just Instagram instead of Snapchat. And so it surprises me because I'm hard-pressed to believe that, Facebook didn't really understand what the use case was behind stories, in Instagram, and how people would use them as opposed to how people would use them in Snapchat. Clearly they did their research, and clearly they determined that there was a use case and people would be, kind of jazzed about it. But again, like I think that they're trying to capture something different probably than what Snapchat is, and it might work for them. I think if they were trying to just like clone Snapchat and clone all of the use cases of Snapchat, maybe they could pull it off, but I would say 99 times out of 100, it's just not going to work.
I think it'll be an interesting case study to watch because it has added something to Instagram. It has added a dynamic and real-time feeling of Instagram and an emphasis on video in Instagram that did not exist before, and it feels like they have snatched a little bit of the Snapchat thunder, but there does seem to be, maybe this is imagined, but it does seem to be a competitor focus here that, I don't know. It's like this is sort of what got Google into trouble with the Google Plus stuff, was like the competitor focus ended up just being such a massive waste of resources. But
absolutely.
I don't know. Different case study. I guess it's...
And I mean, why would you say that is? I mean, I have my theories about why it didn't work, but I'm curious what your thoughts
why Google
are.
Plus didn't work?
Yeah.
I think it was an execution issue. I think they could have done it. It was just, something went wrong in the execution. I think they, like, maybe how they tried to blanket all of their services with, like, integrations, and Google has so many product lines. You have to do this massive alignment and orchestration in order to get everything right, and it sort of felt like, they didn't decentralize it well enough, Like, they could have... I don't know. It's hard to remember in retrospect exactly what it was like at the time, but I think I remember just using Google Plus, and I was like, at the time, I remember I posted a couple things about this. I was like, well, there goes Facebook, and boy, was I wrong.
Yeah, I think that it came down again to they didn't really understand the problem that they were solving, and I think that my previous job was at MySpace, like during the sort of the decline.
I was going to ask you about that.
Yeah, and so like when I joined, it was kind of like the high watermark of popularity, and I was there kind of for the sort of the mass decline and hemorrhage of users. I think that the reason that Facebook was able to come along and swoop all of the users, because MySpace had everyone, literally had everyone.
Yeah.
And Facebook was able to usurp all of that because they understood the problem. And I can say at MySpace that nobody really understood what MySpace was, or what MySpace was really trying to do. MySpace was originally a platform for bands, and then it was like, oh, now it's a platform for anyone that can copy paste some HTML, CSS into like a web forum. And then finally they decided to strike while the iron was lukewarm and go back to being a music-oriented software. Like, nobody really knew what MySpace was, and Facebook was able to come along and realize what the problem was, and realize kind of what people should be using or what people wanted to use, and build that. And without that, like, sort of foundational knowledge of like what people are actually looking for, which I think is only just sort of hard-earned by just like grinding it out and talking to people, and ultimately products are about people. I feel like it's very difficult to look on the periphery of how something works and build it and make it work.
What is that insight that Facebook had that MySpace didn't?
I think that they lived it and they breathed it. You know what I mean? He was there. He was, living the college life or whatever, and understood from a fundamental level how people wanted to interact on the internet and how that sort of social aspect of our sort of digital lives would come together. Whereas MySpace, we really didn't. We had no idea. We had no idea why people used MySpace. They just did, and we decided to capitalize on it. Or that was my kind of feeling as a lowly engineer at a massive company. It didn't ever seem like they had a full grasp on what problem they were solving or what they were really trying to do or what the heart and soul of the company was. And I think that that's evident in the way that it kind of oscillated between, what they were doing or what audience they were really going for.
Yeah, I've watched a lot of talks that Peter Thiel has given discussing Facebook. I think he also talks about this in 0 to 1, where he says that his thesis is basically Facebook is the identity platform of the internet. It is how you associate your personal identity. And I think that's true. Going back to the Facebook versus Google question, the Google Plus versus Facebook question, it is interesting to note that, you have your inbox in Gmail, and that in some sense feels like an identity. It's tough for me to identify what about my Facebook identity is so much more identifying than Google is. I don't know.
Yeah, that's a good question, and one I probably don't have the answer to. It's hard to say.
Well, tell me more about MySpace, because this was, it's just like, I mean, I don't want to say too early because MySpace sold for a lot of money, but I feel like, one of the things Facebook had at its back was, I guess, people were getting better at understanding how product development should proceed. Maybe this was sort of getting to be the post-Jobs era where, Steve Jobs had sort of pioneered, here's a way to do product development. I mean, that had something to do with it. Maybe it's like post-Gates or early Google product development. You really had this mojo of how products get developed, and that allowed Facebook to move at a faster pace because they understood that. MySpace was really in the primordial soup of the internet.
It really was. And, I think that people forget how far back MySpace went and how, JavaScript was like right. It was like, whoa, you have JavaScript. You know what I mean? That was, how old MySpace was. And, as I mentioned, I don't think out of the entire lifespan of the company, anybody really understood what MySpace was or what MySpace should be doing. And maybe it was just before web products had become so defined and so concise in their, sort of delivery that I think everybody kind of learned a lot from MySpace, and it was definitely a kind of integral part of the internet. And, is the antecedent for a lot of companies and products today. But, I think that you're definitely right in that kind of, or that brand of, very precise product development or even, web products in general just didn't exist at the early onset. And, I don't think that the people of MySpace ever, even the ones that originally created it, knew what they were building, really. They were kind of just as far as I understood, throwing something together and kind of seeing if it would stick, which I guess is a lot of what, startups are made, but still, it just never really struck me as they had a really solid plan for what the product is or where it was going.
Cullen Zandstra, I want to thank you for coming on Software Engineering Daily. It's been a great conversation.
Thank you so much for having me.
A few quick announcements before we go. Software Engineering Daily is conducting our annual listener survey, which is available on softwareengineeringdaily.com. You can click on the survey link. The survey really helps us understand our listeners and gives us data that we can show to advertisers that help get us better sponsorship deals. Also, the Software Engineering Daily community has started working on MinerRanker. This is an open source newsfeed platform. We are trying to democratize the idea of a newsfeed so that the only newsfeeds in town are not necessarily Twitter or Facebook or any other centralized newsfeed. We'd like to make it possible for anybody to make a newsfeed. So you can check out the MinerRanker project at minerranker.com. You can check out an implementation of MinerRanker at softwaredaily.com. You can find links to all of this stuff at softwareengineeringdaily.com. There you can also find a link to join our Slack group, to follow us on Meetup for future meetups, and other information. So thanks again for listening.